John 15:4 is a fun sentence to translate. It's a little challenging in terms of structure, but it's not hard at all. And Jesus starts off with his main point. Menete en emoi, kago en humin. Now he's going to explain it. Kathos taklema udunatai karpon ferein, afheal tu, eon me mene ente ampello. Hutos udehumes, eon me en emoi menete. So we start with a form that you should recognize as meno. If you've learned your roots, it's pretty easy to identify this. The key is the alpha. When do you get the alpha in there? You get it when it's an aorist imperative in this case. So remain, and it's a terrible word using remain for meno. Too bad we can't bring back the old English abide, because that actually is what Jesus is saying, but nobody says abide anymore, so we're stuck with remain, unfortunately. I'm going to say abide. Abide, in other words, abide is much more a fuller meaning word than simply remain. Remain means you just hang out. Abide is more active participation. But anyway, you can talk about that in class. Abide in me, and I in you all. So the abiding, the connection goes both directions. Now here's why this is so important. Just as the branch is not able to bear fruit by itself, you have this initial breathing mark and vowel. So apa goes to op, goes to off with an elision mark. So not able to bear fruit by itself. And then aeon me, unless, of course, now you start expecting subjunctives, right? Because of aeon. Unless it remain, so third singular subjunctive, right? In the branch. So obviously a branch has been cut off, isn't going to be able to bear any fruit. We've already talked about that a few verses back. In the same way, neither you, and it's interesting, we'll see this in the phrasing, but something's left out that's parallel from the first half. So also neither are you something unless you remain in me. Okay? Now, in order to get the phrasing on the screen, I have to shrink the text some, but that's okay. So, remain in me and I in you. There's your main sentence, right? The rest is an explanation of why that's true. And what we need to do here is that kathos is going to be parallel with something else, kind of acting as a connector. So I want to put that out there. So it's just as the branch is not able to bear fruit, and I wouldn't have to do this, but I think I'm going to. It's talking about bearing fruit by itself. The reason I did that is that you have this phrase, unless it remains in the vine, and they're kind of parallel. They're both having to do with bearing fruit. And then you get a second connector, and the hutos parallels the kathos. And the reason that's really important to see is that this explains this, so also you. Well, so also you what? And then this gets tabbed out. Now, I wanted to do that because I wanted you to see that this phrase and this phrase are parallel to each other, right? Unless it remains attached to the vine, unless you remain in me. Okay, so you can see the parallelism, right? You've got the same opening idiom. You've got the same verb. You have the same preposition. So what's parallel is the vine and then Jesus. But the other reason I wanted you to see this is that kathos and hutos are acting as the big indicators of the structure. And so what this tells you is that here you have this phrase, which is parallel with this phrase. But in the first part, you are the branches not able to bear fruit. In the second half, so also you. Well, you what? Are not able to bear fruit, which is then assumed in this second half. Understand that in Greek, when you have parallel structures, there's often going to be stuff in the first half that's not repeated in the second half. We do the same thing in English. It just feels a little more natural to us. So the full thought of the verse is, remain in me and I in you. Why? Well, because just as the branch is not able to bear fruit, can't bear fruit by itself, can't bear fruit unless it remains in the vine, in the same way, neither are you able to bear fruit unless you remain in me. So it's a fun sentence to phrase, and it kind of explains what's going on.